Celeste Morris had only been at Northbridge High School for 3 weeks when it happened. The third-floor restroom, quiet with flickering fluorescent lights, was supposed to be just a brief stop between two counseling sessions. But the metal door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing off the white-tiled walls. Her heart pounded fiercely, breath grew heavy, cold air creeping through her jacket. She turned around. 3 male students, football jackets, arms crossed. Troy stepped forward first, his voice calm but loaded with meaning. "Ms. Morris, right? New here. We just want to help you. Understand the rules around here." Marcus cracked his knuckles. Blake leaned against the sink, eyes never leaving her. Celeste stood still, trying to keep calm amid the suffocating atmosphere. "I'm here to help students," she said slowly, "not to be threatened." Troy smiled. "Well then, don't get in our way." Celeste Morris was no stranger to tension. Before coming to Northbridge, she had worked in Chicago's South Side, where false alarms rang out and students fought in the hallways. But here the silence felt heavier. Threats lurked beneath the shiny tile floors and weekend cheer chants. Her name had just been painted on the counseling room door. A new desk, a new coffee cup, the same old mission: listen, support, protect. Principal Kincaid once spoke of restoring moral values. But after only 3 weeks, Celeste saw something else. Avoiding eyes, vague answers, a student shrinking back when she mentioned certain names. Now she had met them: Troy, Marcus, Blake, 3 names, a locked room, and a silence as if it had been bought. As if it had been... Monday arrived with cold rain and forced smiles. Celeste walked down the hallway, clipboard in hand, observing. Students moved in groups, some noisy, some silent. But one thing was clear. Troy, Marcus, and Blake were like gravity. Everyone subtly shifted aside whenever they passed. In the teacher's lounge, she casually asked about the 3. "They're active," Mr. Lowell replied, eyes glancing toward the hall. "Sports stars, bright futures, best not to mess with them." But Celeste knew that ship had started leaking. By third period, a student named Lila knocked on her door. Soft voice, shaky hands. Lila spoke of cruel pranks, threats, vandalized lockers, but never named names. "They make me feel like I don't deserve to exist," she whispered. Celeste bent down gently. "You matter." But inside she knew Lila wasn't afraid of those 3 boys. She was afraid of a system that always turned a blind eye. The next day, Northbridge's hallway was gloomy under uneven flickering fluorescent lights. Footsteps echoed, stretching like a warning no one dared forget. Celeste watched the scene with a heavy heart. In a hidden corner on the second floor, a group of female students immediately changed direction upon seeing Troy approach. No words spoken, only a few bowed heads and hurried footsteps, as if fear filled every corner. In the teacher's lounge, Celeste gently asked Mr. Lowell about the powerful trio. He responded with a dry smile. "There are like ghosts in the school. Leave no trace, but everyone must be cautious." In the evening, a crumpled note was slipped under her door, bearing just 4 rough words: "You should stay silent." Celeste stared at the line. Not a warning, but a reminder of the rules. That night, Celeste opened the note again. She wasn't scared, but her heart felt heavy as stone. Those words, she had seen them elsewhere, where silence was currency and truth a luxury. The next morning she arrived early. The hallways were still empty. She stood between rows of lockers and closed her eyes. She wanted to feel the school as the students did, and the first thing she noticed was sound. The quick glide of shoes, the quiet closing of lockers, whispers caught between teeth. Northbridge was not noisy. Northbridge sounded like something buried beneath the tiled floor. In her office, Celeste began taking notes. Not student files, but behavior. Schedules, connections between names. No one officially reported anything. But sound doesn't lie. That noon, Celeste called an 11th grade student into the counseling room. Her name was Ava. Good grades, no rule violations, but lately often absent from gym class. Ava entered, eyes avoiding contact, clutching her backpack straps. Celeste spoke gently. "I just want to ask, are you okay these days?" Ava nodded, but the silence lasted too long. Celeste didn't rush. She let the silence remain, because sometimes silence says more than words. Finally, Ava whispered, "I don't want trouble. They said if I say anything, I'll regret it." Celeste didn't ask who they were. She already knew. And it was the way Ava looked down, like apologizing for telling the truth, that made Celeste's heart heavy. That girl wasn't afraid of people. She was afraid of a system that didn't stand with her. At the end of the day, Celeste returned to an old classroom in the West Wing. She often stopped by rooms with little traffic. places where students gathered after hours without supervision. Room 2.14 was quiet, lights flickering. On the teacher's desk, a notebook's cover was slashed, and under the desk, a gummy candy was taped with the scrawled marker message, "No one cares about you." Celeste didn't react. She took out her phone and photographed every detail, not because it was strong enough evidence, but because she knew every little piece was a map of an underground world operating right inside the school. As she left the room, she glanced at the old, peeling nameplate on the door. The school was not short on cameras. It was just people chose not to look where they needed to most. Late afternoon, after students had mostly left, Celeste was cleaning her desk when there was a soft knock. Jonah, a 10th grader who usually sat alone in the library, walked in, clutching his backpack straps, eyes red-rimmed and anxious. He spoke quietly, voice trembling. "I saw them corner a girl against the wall behind the yard last Tuesday." Celeste tilted her head, voice gentle. "Are you sure?" Jonah nodded, then whispered as if afraid of being overheard. "I didn't dare intervene, but I think you should know." His eyes darted around the room as if looking for a hidden camera. Celeste didn't ask who they were. She understood the fear was not of the bullies, but of a system that they turned a blind eye. That boy wasn't afraid of people, but afraid of the helplessness of those meant to protect. The next morning, something had changed in Northbridge's hallway. Not obvious, but enough for Celeste to notice. Not because students were quieter, but because of the eyes. Sneaky. Avoiding. Something in the air made her steps heavier, but it wasn't exactly fear. During third period, passing by the lockers in the east wing, she found a carefully folded note tucked loosely between bookshelves. No name, no address, just a messy pencil scrawl. "Thank you for not giving up." She held it, staring long. Not an accusation, not evidence, but something she never got from any parent meetings, reports, or emails. An anonymous note, light as the wind, and heavy as the truth finally acknowledged. The library was nearly empty late in the afternoon. Celeste entered to find some materials on school intervention, but what she heard made her stop. Behind the American history bookshelf, a faint voice spoke. She didn't try to eavesdrop, but a male student's voice was clear. "If you say anything to Ms. Morris again, consider your phone disappeared." A harsh laugh, then silence. Celeste stepped back. No one saw her. She couldn't see their faces. But the threat was clear, and not the first time she had heard such words. A few minutes later, she saw a younger boy hurry past, eyes red-rimmed. She didn't stop him, didn't ask. Instead, she returned to her office, opened her notebook, and wrote, "Fear of losing things, so they keep the fear." A new kind of silence. Another form of punishment. That afternoon, Celeste met Mr. Lowell in the teacher's lounge. He was making old coffee, his gaze distant. "Do you know anything about those three?" she asked directly. "Troy, Marcus, Blake." Lowell didn't answer immediately. He sat down, gently stirring his spoon as if weighing his words. "Did you see the blonde PE teacher who worked here last year?" Celeste shook her head. "He was transferred. No clear reason. But before that he had reported unusual behavior around the football team." Celeste looked at him. "And then?" Lowell met her eyes for the first time. No one mentioned it again. There was just a new team photo added to the wall. A victory. And someone disappeared. Friday passed slower than usual. The school held a ceremony honoring the football team. Photos of Troy, Marcus, and Blake hung proudly in the main hall beneath golden letters, symbols of Northbridge spirit. Celeste stood afar, silently watching. Students took pictures, teachers nodded politely, Principal Kincaid gave a brief speech about the pride of the school. Everything was so polished it felt suffocating. That afternoon, after the ceremony ended, Celeste returned to her office and found a new note on her desk. No one admitted to leaving it. No cameras caught it. The simple message, "Do you think you'll win?" She read it, folded it, and placed it with the other scraps in her file drawer. Celeste wasn't afraid, but she knew. Before the storm rises, everything is eerily quiet. Friday night, Celeste received a mysterious email at her school account. No subject, no sender, just one short sentence. "If you really want to know what's going on, come to the old music room at Todos Hoyas on Sunday." Sunday light rain. The area around the school was quiet and dark. Celeste stood before the wooden door of the music room, the only light a flickering street lamp through the frosted glass. She almost backed away, heart racing in the chilly air, when suddenly a soft noise came from inside. Someone moving. She didn't enter, instead quietly slipped a note under the door. "I'm ready to listen. When you're ready to speak." Celeste left without looking back, knowing that sometimes a sincere invitation is enough to start a conversation. Near midnight Sunday, Celeste woke to the school phone ringing, forwarded to her voicemail. An audio file arrived from an unknown address. She played it, static. Then a young, trembling voice. Troy said if I don't pay up, they'll handle me like Matt, that I'll disappear and no one will stand up for me. A distant laugh. Footsteps. The file cut off. Matt. A name never before in the records. Celeste checked the old student list. No Matt had transferred recently. She searched deeper. A student who dropped out midterm. No official reason given. The withdrawal form only bore a parent's signature. The next morning, Celeste printed the file and locked it in the safe. Northbridge already had a victim, but no one wanted to call them by their real name. Monday, Celeste went to the school library where old paper records were kept before digitization. She asked Cheryl, the longtime librarian, about a student named Matt who had once studied at Northbridge but suddenly withdrew. Cheryl hesitated, then whispered, eyes never leaving her teacup. Matt Rivers. 11th grade, missing 3 weeks before dropping out. His mother wrote this withdrawal letter, no explanation. No one asked for more? Celeste softly asked. They did, Cheryl replied, but then were told the family wanted privacy. His name vanished from every wall, both class photos and yearbooks. Celeste thanked her and left silently, but her heart was heavier than any counseling session before. When a name can be erased that easily, the next one could be anyone. Back in her office, Celeste flipped through student files. Not looking for proof, she knew there wouldn't be any. Just looking for signs, unexplained absences, sudden grade drops, hastily written transfer requests. She started a chart, names, dates, behavioral notes. By the 8th entry, a pattern emerged. A loop. The students with the least voice were often those quietly disappearing from the lists. Around noon, a teaching assistant stopped by. Seeing Celeste's handwritten chart, he was stunned. What are you trying to do? Celeste answered softly without looking up. Find the story the school doesn't want to tell. He didn't reply, just quietly closed the door, and she knew with that gesture another person had chosen to stay silent. Late afternoon, weak sunlight streamed through the classroom window, casting Celeste's shadow across a whiteboard filled with messy writing. In bold black ink on the board, Do you think you're different from them? Celeste stood still, hands relaxed at her sides, not rushing to erase. Her shadow on the board was like a silent declaration of defiance. A group of students passed by, laughing, but fell silent when they saw her standing there. The door quietly closed, leaving a silent space. Celeste quickly took a photo of the writing with her phone, not to accuse, but to remember. She added below in red pen, I don't think, I act. Then she left the room without looking back, a powerful message sent not just with words, but with eyes and actions. Tuesday morning, Celeste was summoned to Principal Kincaid's office. Mrs. Kincaid sat behind her desk, hands neatly folded on a file. No smile, no pleasantries. Ms. Morris, I hear you're taking notes on certain matters? Celeste nodded calmly. I'm monitoring signs of student harm, as my position requires. Kincaid studied her for a long moment, then said, Northbridge needs stability. We don't want to create suspicion in the community. I hope you understand. Celeste said nothing. Kincaid continued, If you see something truly serious, report it directly to me. No need to broadcast it. As Celeste left, she clearly heard the door close automatically behind her. No lock clicking, just a clear feeling that someone had just tried to silence her with the softest invitation. That afternoon, Celeste received a message from Mr. Lowell. Meet me in the storage room after hours, alone. At 6:15 p.m., light rain. The old records room behind the library smelled of aging paper mixed with chalk dust. Lowell stood there silently for a few seconds. Finally, he spoke. I've seen this before. 5 years ago, another student, also silent, also vanished. And what did you do? Celeste asked. Voice not accusing, just seeking to know. Lowell swallowed hard. Not enough evidence. No one dared confirm. And I was tired. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a 2018 internal memo. Red crossed out words. Should not be publicly handled. Avoid impacting the team. Celeste folded it, looking at him. Being tired, that is no longer an excuse. That night, Celeste sat alone in her office. The old memo Lowell had just given her in front of her. She read each line coldly printed, trying to understand what she was facing. Negligence or systemic complicity. The last line of the memo was clear under her desk lamp. Maintain the team's image positively at all times. No mention of students, no mention of safety, only image. She flipped open her notebook, writing on a blank page. At Northbridge, students are not the center. Achievement is the shield, and silence is the weapon. A breeze blew lightly through the window crack, stirring the page. Celeste knew tomorrow would be different. Because from this moment on, she would no longer just document. She would force them to read it with her. Wednesday morning, Celeste saw Ava standing outside the counseling room, clutching her backpack straps, eyes fixed on the tile floor as if counting her heartbeat. Inside, the girl stayed silent for a long time, then whispered, "They call me a snitch. I'm not. I'm just tired of pretending not to see." Celeste nodded without interrupting. Ava placed a USB on the table. "I'm not sure if it's useful, but I recorded the locker room that day. Accidentally. I forgot to turn off the recorder." Celeste took it, her hand trembling slightly. "You're not the first person who wants to change this place," Ava said. "But maybe you're the first who didn't turn away." Those words weren't thanks. They were testimony. That someone finally chose to stand still in the light. Celeste plugged the USB into the school computer, put on headphones. Black screen, only file. Record steroid 3 Donda wave. Sounds played. Loud laughter, sneakers hitting lockers, then a familiar voice. Troy. "Anyone who opens their mouth is done. Remember, Matt? Now shut up." Something dropped to the floor. Someone whispered, "We'll get caught." Another voice interrupted. Definite Marcus. "No one gets caught at Northbridge. They just get moved." Celeste removed the headphones. Her chest tightened, not from the threat, but from the last voice. Cold, familiar, and resigned. They weren't afraid of being caught. They were used to no one daring to listen. This time they were wrong, because she was listening. And she wouldn't turn off the recorder. Recess time, Celeste walked slowly down the second-floor hallway. She wasn't looking for people. She was looking for eyes. Some students slipped past, shoulders shrinking when they saw her. Another group turned away, laughter cutting off mid-sentence. No one spoke, but no one pretended not to see anymore. At the end of the hall, she saw Jonah, the boy who had whispered about the backyard last week. He stood by a classroom door, gripping the edge of his shirt. When she passed, Jonah didn't say hello, just nodded slightly. Celeste stopped, returned the gesture with a gentle look. No words needed, because some conversations happen in silence. And great changes start with the smallest nods. The next door cracked open. Someone was watching from inside. For the first time, she felt fear was beginning to slip away. A short staff meeting was held in the library. Topic: school safety. Principal Kincaid made some general remarks. Commitment, listening, zero tolerance. Celeste sat in the back row, silent. Everyone nodded as if they had heard it all before. Near the end, she raised her hand. "I only have one question," she spoke slowly. "If students know they're being threatened, know who's behind it, and know the school won't act, should they stay silent?" The room fell utterly silent. Principal Kincaid looked at her, a tight smile on her lips. No one answered. No one needed to. Because sometimes silence is the clearest confession. That afternoon, Celeste returned to the locker room behind the gym where Ava had said she accidentally recorded an important conversation. The room was empty, fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, casting a cold, flickering glow. The smell of old sweat and stains on the tiled floor made the space feel heavier. She turned on her phone, started filming each corner, capturing scratches on the walls and scrawled words on lockers. Those who speak first lose first. Her footsteps echoed on the cold tiles. Suddenly, a paper slid out from a slightly open locker. She bent down to pick it up. On it was a list of students with notes. Exceeds limit, monitor, handle later. Celeste clenched her fists, realizing Northbridge was not just about open threats, but an underground system operating in the dark. That evening, Celeste took the list home. Sitting in her small living room, she matched each name with student files. Strange. All names marked handle later had disciplinary records, then wiped clean without a trace. She found a transfer form for a student named Diego. No reason given, no transfer transcripts. But a handwritten note in blue ink: caused trouble for coach, parents disruptive, handled. Handled. A word not found in educational dictionaries, but very real at Northbridge as an internal order. Celeste straightened up. The school didn't run on ideals. Here it ran on a network of priorities. And silencing all inconveniences. And she, now, was becoming a growing inconvenience. Friday, the football semifinal took place on the main field. The whole school cheered. Troy led the team, Marcus and Blake close beside, lights shining on their helmets like untouchable heroes. Celeste sat in the back row, not cheering, just watching. Below, students wore school flags, painted faces, holding player name boards. But behind the noise, she saw Ava, standing close to the fence, not cheering, not waving. Ava looked straight at Troy, expressionless, no hatred, just the look of someone who knew a truth, and still had to remain silent among the cheering crowd. Celeste stepped down a few rows, stood beside Ava, said nothing. They did not join the cheers, because sometimes timely silence is the strongest protest. Midway through the second half, the stadium roared as Troy scored. On the stands, students jumped, flags waving. But Celeste wasn't watching the field. She looked at the hallway beside the stands, where 3 male students dragged a younger boy, gripping his shirt, laughing. No one noticed. All eyes were on the game. She hurried down just enough to see the boy pushed against the wall behind the seats. A dry thud, then silence. Celeste ran over. The 3 boys scattered, pretending to joke. The boy was scared, hand shielding his forehead, eyes glistening with tears. No blood, no cameras, but she saw. And now, the story was no longer on the scoreboard. It was happening amid the cheers. Celeste took the pusher boy to the medical area near the field. His name was Noah, 9th grade, thin and quiet. She wiped a slight bruise on his forehead, asking little. "Do you want to talk?" she asked softly, quieter than the wind. Noah nodded, a slow nod, as if finally allowing himself to trust someone. He told her he'd been followed for 2 weeks. Someone hid his books, poured water in his locker. Every time he tried telling teachers, they told him, "Don't accuse without cause." Celeste gently held his hand, saying only one thing. This time, adults won't turn away. After Noah left the medical room, Celeste recorded everything in a report, not to store, but to prove what happened and who didn't stop it. Monday, Celeste returned to school with a clear decision. She wouldn't go alone. She emailed several teachers she had noticed silent during meetings. Brief message, "I know something's happening. If you know too, come to the counseling room at 4 p.m. No minutes, no pressure." At 4 p.m. she didn't expect anyone, but then Mr. Lowell appeared first, then Myra the librarian, then a math teacher, a part-time monitor, a special support staff. No one spoke much, just sat down. Celeste stood, looking at each face. They weren't allies yet, but today they nodded at her. And at Northbridge, a timely nod can start an entire investigation. The unofficial meeting lasted exactly 32 minutes. No recording, no photos, no invitations. Celeste started with a simple question. What have you witnessed? But it chose to stay silent about. No immediate answers, but eyes met then dropped. Mr. Lowell told of a student forced to transfer after reporting the sports team managing the field after hours. No one believed him. His mother cried in the office and never returned. Myra had seen Troy take a computer from the library, unsigned and unreturned. When she reported it, the administration ignored it. No one was surprised, no one shocked. It was just the first time things everyone knew were spoken aloud in a lit room. After the meeting, Celeste opened the tracking chart she'd quietly kept for a month. She added a new column. Witness. Names of affected students listed. Noah, Ava, Matt, no longer at school, Diego, Lila. Beside each name, a description, a sign, an adult who knew, but once chose silence. In total, 17 cases, 8 teachers had seen, 0 official actions. She printed 3 copies, 1 for her desk, 1 locked away, 1 sent to the library, where Myra would hide it temporarily in the seldom borrowed life skills books. This list didn't exist in the electronic system, but if anyone asked later, "Is this true?" Celeste would place that paper on the table and say, "Yes," and we documented every line. Wednesday, after classes, Celeste found a small note on her desk. No envelope, no sender, just 1 line written in italic marker. Library, 5:45 p.m., a former student wants to meet. At 5:42, she had waited outside the dark library door, hallway lights quietly flickering. The door opened suddenly. A tall young man stepped out, hood pulled low. He lowered the hood. It was Matt. No records, no report cards, no class photos. But Celeste recognized his eyes, the exact match to the voice in the recording. He spoke softly. "I'm not here to answer. I'm here to confirm." She nodded, taking no notes, because some evidence comes in human form, and some fears only fade when seen. Matt sat on an old wooden chair by the window. Outside, a few students lingered in the courtyard. Inside the library, only the 2 of them. He spoke neither fast nor slow, steady, dry, emotionless. They called it the loyalty test. If I didn't comply, they'd make me like I never existed at Northbridge. Celeste didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. Matt looked at her, his gaze faltering for the first time. Are you going to report this, or just file it away and forget? Celeste shook her head. I don't write reports anymore. I rewrite reality. Matt nodded lightly. He didn't smile. But as he left, his shoulders no longer stiffened like when he arrived. A brief meeting, but enough for someone to return from being erased. The next morning, Northbridge's hallway was no longer as quiet as usual. Troy walked through the students, eyes sharper, steps heavier. He looked around, as if searching for who was watching. Marcus passed by the counseling room, knocked lightly on the door 3 times without waiting. Blake left a blank note in Jonah's locker. No words, just red slashes like knives. Celeste realized. They knew she wasn't afraid. She just recorded. In class, Ava met Marcus's gaze. She didn't lower her head, didn't avoid. For the first time. Celeste stood outside the classroom, watching through the glass. She didn't intervene, didn't need to, because when power begins to feel watched, it loses its ease, and when victims start to look straight ahead, the silent cycle is about to break. That afternoon, Celeste was called to the principal's office. Mrs. Kincaid sat behind her desk, hands clasped, her tone no longer as gentle as before. Ms. Morris, I've recently received many fragmented reports. Students are confused. Teachers are tense. Do you know what's going on? Celeste looked straight at her. I think finally people are starting to tell the truth. Silence. Mrs. Kincaid's face tightened for a few seconds. Then she lowered her voice. We must protect the school's reputation. Celeste nodded lightly. Exactly, but reputation cannot be built on misplaced nods. Mrs. Kincaid stood up, about to end the conversation. But before Celeste left, she glanced at the mirror on the wall. A hairline crack had just appeared. Breakage always begins with things seemingly invisible. Friday morning during civics class, a student raised his hand. It was Jonah. Ma'am, if a student sees their friend being threatened but the teacher doesn't intervene, what should they do? The class was silent. The teacher hesitated. Well, you should tell a trusted adult. Jonah nodded, then looked at Ava sitting beside him. They said nothing more, but a few other students started exchanging glances. At recess that day, 3 students came to the counseling room. Unannounced, no explanations needed. We see it, and we want to tell. Celeste didn't write immediately. She let them finish speaking, took notes afterward, because when students start to listen to each other, the system is no longer one-sided. It begins to become a dialogue. That weekend, Northbridge's official information page posted an article, proud of student unity and responsibility. Images. Troy holding the championship cup, Marcus shaking the principal's hand, Blake standing behind, faint smile. No mention of the counseling room, no mention of Jonah, Ava, or Matt. No words about meetings, testimonies, wounds. Celeste looked at the post, then opened her laptop and wrote a short email. To all teaching staff. Subject, truth doesn't need headlines, only someone to keep it from disappearing. She didn't attach documents, no links, only one sentence in the body. I'm still listening, and I'm no longer alone. Sometimes the strongest statement needs only 17 words. Monday morning, a printed sheet appeared on the bulletin board near the cafeteria. No sender name, no school logo, only the title. A list of ignored matters. Below were brief bullet points. A student forced to leave in 2018. A counselor suddenly transferred. 3 students repeatedly bullied, unprotected. A librarian aware but warned when speaking up. Students stopped, read, took photos, shared. Principal Kincaid had the paper removed within 10 minutes. But 10 minutes was enough. Enough for truth to no longer be only on paper. It was printed in memory, passed hand to hand, photo to photo, whispered across lunch tables. That noon, Northbridge's yard was different. Not because there was no chatter, but because the voices had changed. No cruel jokes, no silence when someone was shoved into lockers or mocked in the hallway. Instead, there was attention. Celeste walked across the yard, catching groups of students whispering, exchanging phones, pointing at images of the lists that had been taken down. A 10th grader whispered to a friend, "The counselor was right. We can't wait for adults forever." Celeste didn't smile, but her eyes softened, because for the first time this school's silence was not from fear, but from people thinking about how they will speak up. That afternoon, Celeste found a small note in her desk drawer. Familiar handwriting. Neat, slightly slanted. It was from Mr. Lowell. Teacher's meeting room, 4:30 p.m. I'm ready to speak. When she entered, 6 people were already seated. Besides Lowell and Myra, there were 2 teachers who had avoided her for weeks. Lowell stood and nodded quietly. I used to think silence was how to keep safe, but students can't grow up with false safety. Celeste said nothing, just sat down. Myra opened her laptop, projecting a summary of incidents from 2016 to now, quietly recorded by many in the room. For the first time, adults at Northbridge didn't just admit knowledge. They began recording it as deliberate action. 3 days later, an envelope appeared on Principal Kincaid's desk. No sender. Inside was a full copy of the summary compiled by the teachers. Dates, student names, coded, incidents, and the school's reactions, or lack thereof. At the end was a handwritten line. "We do not seek punishment, we demand responsibility." Celeste didn't put her name on it. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, paper was no longer a tool to hide, but a way to force those in power to face the truth. Truth no longer stood alone in scattered reports. It was sealed by a collective. And a collective is hard to ignore. Late afternoon, as classrooms emptied, Principal Kincaid unexpectedly knocked on Celeste's door. She brought a new, tidy set of files. Her voice had changed, no longer cold. "Ms. Morris, I want to thank you for your efforts. Internal surveys show the school environment is improving." Celeste looked at the files, seeing notes on many previously forgotten students, including plans for the psychological support anti-bullying workshops held. "We still have work to do," Kincaid said, "but this is a start." Celeste smiled softly, eyes glistening. Finally, even those who once stayed silent could change, and the light began to shine on hidden corners. That weekend, Celeste and the anti-bullying teacher group held the first meeting of the newly established council. Members came from various departments, teachers, monitors, librarians, and even some enthusiastic students. Myra shared ideas for a school violence training program. Lowell proposed improved psychological support systems. Celeste looked at each face, feeling the strength of unity. A new teacher entered, handing her a small letter, a thank you note from a parent of a bullied student. "Thank you for not abandoning our children." Celeste gently folded the letter. Her story was no longer just a personal fight. It had become a flame to light the way for many others. At the end of the term, Celeste received many handwritten letters from students. Simple thanks. "Thank you for helping me find my voice. Thank you for teaching us courage. Thank you for standing up for the vulnerable." She read each letter, tears welling. Each letter was a story, a piece of change she had helped create. Celeste placed the letters on her desk, watching sunlight shine through the window, illuminating those small words. Though challenges lay ahead, she knew this journey was not alone. A dream for a safer school was slowly becoming real, and she, Celeste Morris, would continue to keep that flame burning. The first day of the new term, Celeste entered school with a different feeling. Eyes no longer avoided her. Small smiles appeared in corners of once cold hallways. Student groups discussed their rights and safety more actively. Celeste saw them stand, not with fear, but with resilience. She knew those steps, even small, were changing every brick, every door, every breath of Northbridge. And she smiled, realizing this fight was not just for one, but for all. Celeste's story didn't end here. It was just beginning. In a newly formed group meeting, Celeste stood before young faces. She spoke gently but firmly. "We're not just here to talk about problems. We're here to act." A female student raised her hand and said, "We want to create an environment where everyone is respected." Celeste nodded, smiling. "That is our pledge. Every day, every hour, every minute." Those promises aren't written in textbooks, but they're etched in hearts. And though challenges remain, they have chosen not to give up. Northbridge's story and Celeste's was being written, page by page. The next morning, Celeste opened the counseling room door with a completely different mindset. Sunlight white streamed through the window, shining on neatly arranged books and files. Students came in with more confident smiles, stories shared, no longer suppressed. She heard each voice, each story, and saw a clear change in their eyes. Not fear, but hope. Northbridge was gradually becoming a place where everyone could stand up for themselves. Celeste knew the journey was long, but today was an important step, and she was ready to walk it alongside them. That day, in a newly opened life skills class, a group of young students stood in a circle. Celeste stood in the middle, encouraging them to share personal stories and listen. They spoke of fear, loneliness, but also belief in strength and companionship. One student said, "We're no longer alone." Celeste looked around, feeling the spreading positive energy. She knew these young people would be the successors, keeping the fire alive and growing a culture intolerant of violence and bullying. And though challenges remained, she believed with them the future would be different. Northbridge was gradually transforming. And this story was no longer hers alone. At the end of the day, after everyone left, Celeste stayed behind to tidy the office. She looked around, recalling her first days at Northbridge, where silence and neglect once dominated. Now, she saw the small but certain progress she and her colleagues had made. A small thank you letter was pinned to the file cabinet from a student who had suffered violence. She smiled, gently stroking the papers on her desk. Though the road was long, though this was not the final victory, dedication is never meaningless. Every story told, every voice heard, is a step toward a brighter future. One weekend afternoon, Celeste attended a mental health workshop for students and teachers. In the meeting room, she saw many familiar faces, those who had stood with her in the fight against bullying. Stories were shared, experiences exchanged, and new plans outlined. Celeste felt the power of connection and unity. She knew this was not just a job, but a mission, a strong bond between compassionate and determined hearts. Tomorrow she would return to Northbridge with renewed resolve, because despite ongoing challenges, she was no longer alone. One morning, Celeste received a call from Ava's mother. The mother's voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for helping my child become braver. She now knows how to stand up and speak the truth." Celeste smiled softly. That's what all of them deserve. After the call ended, she looked out the window where sunlight filtered through leaves. Stories, wounds that are not easy to heal but cannot disappear. They are marks of change. And though many difficulties remain, truth will always exist, told with voices stronger than ever before. A whole school meeting was held to announce a new anti-bullying plan. Principal Kincaid stood at the podium, her voice warmer than usual. Celeste stood beside her, eyes shining brightly. Students listened, no longer with timid looks, but with genuine interest. A student representative spoke. "We commit to building a safe environment where everyone is respected." Applause echoed throughout the hall. Celeste felt hope rise within her. A new light was beginning to shine into Northbridge's shadows, and she knew this was the first step on a long, meaningful journey. That weekend, Celeste and a group of students and teachers attended a workshop on communication skills and conflict resolution. On the way home, everyone chatted animatedly, sharing stories and plans to continue improving the learning environment. Celeste looked around, seeing smiles and determined eyes on the young faces. She knew change did not come from one person, but from the journey of the whole community. Trips like this not only broaden knowledge, but connect hearts with a shared goal. Northbridge was taking steady steps on the path to improvement, and each step marked a story of perseverance and hope. Returning to school after a break, Celeste clearly felt the difference. Student groups no longer hesitated to greet one another in the halls. Stories about safety and respect spread through classrooms. She saw students become bolder, ready to speak up when witnessing injustice. Teachers began coordinating more effectively, supporting students through difficulties. Celeste knew these small steps laid the foundation for lasting change. And she, along with the Northbridge community, was writing a new chapter for the school, a chapter of unity and hope. In a literature class, Celeste observed students attentively listening. Their eyes were different, bright, curious, confident. She saw sincere smiles, nods of agreement. A student raised her hand to share thoughts on respect and courage. Celeste smiled, knowing the values she pursued had begun to take root. Each story, each lesson was not just knowledge, but strength for them to stand up for themselves and each other. This was the belief she always held, that Northbridge's future would be created by these young people. And she was proud to be part of that journey. One Wednesday morning, Celeste walked down the hall hearing lively laughter from a group of students. They were enthusiastically discussing a student rights speech contest. A younger student looked at her, beaming. Celeste realized those laughs were no longer echoes of fear or silence. They were symbols of change, courage, and connection. She knew that despite many challenges ahead, those footsteps would never be erased, and the story of resilience would continue to spread through the old hallways of Northbridge. Night fell. Celeste sat by the office window looking at distant streetlights. She remembered the journey so far, the confrontations, lonely moments, and small victories. Though tired at times, she never thought of giving up. The flame inside her still burned brightly, fueling her to keep fighting. She knew she couldn't change everything immediately, but every step mattered. Most importantly, she was not alone. That flame had spread, reaching every young heart seeking safety and justice. Celeste smiled, silently promising to keep that flame alive forever. The next morning, Celeste entered the school with determined eyes. She knew the story was not over, new challenges awaited. But now she was no longer afraid. Every small voice had been heard, every small action made a difference. Northbridge was truly on the path to change, and Celeste, with the support of new friends, would continue to write the school's next chapter. A story of resilience, courage, and hope, a story where everyone could be the hero of their own life. And that was why she chose to stand up, because change starts with one person and spreads through the whole community. Celeste stood before the school gate, the afternoon sun painting the old wall golden. She breathed deeply, feeling each heartbeat no longer fearful. The footsteps that were once heavy now felt lighter. The story didn't end here. it was only just beginning. Because every person, every student, every teacher was part of the change, and though the road ahead remained difficult, Celeste knew she was not alone. Perseverance, courage, and faith in justice would continue to guide the way. Northbridge would no longer be a place of silence and fear, but a beacon, shining light for those who need a guiding glow. And this story would live on in every step taken next.